thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity. It was very nice to see that the previous talk sparked such a nice discussion. My talk is a much lighter topic, but I think because so many people working in higher education, showing the new trend or showing a new concept, this is the best place to really make this happen. So gamification, what is it? It's a concept I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to brief you in a bit with the history, applications, what it is not. So let's start with the definition of gamification, which is an application of game-like elements into non-game environment. To make it more specific to higher education, it's a developing approach, increasing learners' motivation and engagement, incorporating game design elements in educational environment. But when I say game, you don't have to think about children's playing. Also, it's very human to pick up knowledge by playing. But to brief you in with a bit of history, what gamification is coming from, this term entered the mainstream media in 2010, so 12 years ago, and as any new and promising technology and using more and more electric devices, many fields applied this new theory, including marketing, healthcare, human resources, training, environmental protection, well-being. But if we want to concentrate on higher education and universities, then this could be also support the learning activity, and it can really enhance soft skills, so it's relatable with attitudes, activities, behavior. So when we talk about, and that was also lectures about not just teaching at universities, but educating. And with this concept, we can see a bit more, in a more complex way, how education of students can be approached. So what gamification is not something that's just game-based learning. It's not something that students have to play games with toys or electronics. Obviously you can do that, but please don't think it as just keep an open mind, because it's not something childish. It must have to be taken so lightly. This is a concept that you can apply to improve multiple skills and not just knowledge. When we have a new concept, we have to talk about the Gartner hype cycle, because every new things rise unreachable expectations. An easy example is the Human Genome Project. When it was announced in the early 2000s that the human genome can be mapped, everybody thought that it's going to solve all the genetic problems in the world. But those are too high expectations. And then it always goes a downfall when you have this disillusionment period. But then you have to reach a plateau phase when you can learn a new concept, you can apply a new technology, and then you can have realistic motivations. And when it comes to gamification, in the early, so in 2010, everybody was feeling that it's very motivating, it's engaging, it can improve attendance and participation at university courses. And I'd like to keep up this hype, but we have to be realistic. Gamification is not going to solve all the problems with student attitudes, but if we can keep it in a realistic way, it can improve the teaching methods in higher education. The connection with formal education, as we know, as you all come from universities, how we can teach students, it's most of the time lectures, but you can have tutorials, assignment, project-based learning, lab works, exercises, class discussions, and teamwork. Gamification is just an extra concept that you can build in or combine with the already existing methods. So the learning activities which involve tasks can be taken to, like the subtasks can be gamified. So gamification is not something to exchange your already existent and good methods. It's just to add something up, to add a bit more, to make it more fun, a bit more playful, and therefore engaging for the students, and therefore improving the outcome of the studies. So you can incorporate a suitable combination with game elements and the learning activities, and it's really about improving the outcome. When does it make sense to use? Gamification is good to engage your students, to promote healthy competition, to help the student track their own study progress, and it's also to improve and encourage behavior, because it's not just about the lexical knowledge that you can pass from teacher to student. It's also about attitude that you can teach, soft skills that you can improve in higher education. And here's a bunch of soft skills that can be improved by gamification. The relevance of this method, of this concept in higher education, because we already reached the level of, we have so much e-learning, we have Zoom, Google Teams, any kind of, it's not just a pandemic, we also heard before, we live in a technology-based environment, so education has to keep up with the new trends. And with gamification and the use of technology, you can differentiate and personalize more the interaction. You can motivate the students on many levels because they can all follow their own path. So the struggling student can also be engaged, and the very talented one on the other end can also go in their own path. It can promote critical and strategic thinking. It can clarify the learning progress, and the soft skill improvement, I think, the very important part. What are the elements of gamification? How can you break down this concept to something that's more relatable? We can think about it on three major pillars: components, mechanics, and the dynamics of gamification. The components are easy things to understand. It can be avatars, badges, collections, levels, points, gifting, anything that you can, as a unit, use to build up your teaching progress. These are tiny things, but if you add them up together, it could really involve a more mechanistic element that's going to move the building units forward to create the competition, like collecting points going to create competition. So the mechanistic of gamification, how it can move forward the study of a student, it's including challenges, changes, competition, feedback, resource, rewards, so all kinds of things that feed back to the students so they can motivate. And the dynamics, why it's important, this is an abstract level, what students can achieve with this. You can have an effect on the constraints, emotional level, a more narrative way of teaching, and progression in relationship. And just to give you a more solid example how these elements are connected together, so you can give your student points to provide rewards at the end of the study process, and that could create progression. So that's how the components, the mechanics, leads to a dynamic work environment, a dynamic learning environment, when your students can actually not just get the knowledge, but also enjoy the process as well. Questions that we can ask about gamification: do more game elements produce better results or less? What is the right combination of game elements, putting together your already existing good practice? How you can balance this point reward system that helps the students' intrinsic motivation, or how much pressure it's going to put on them as extrinsic one. You can also ask how the students with different personalities and different learning style are going to be influenced by this by this teaching method. I'm sorry, but there's no easy answer for it. There's no one-fit-for-all solution. gamification have to be tested and find out what's working for you. It's important to distinguish with the learning motivation, because as human beings, we are curious creatures and we have interest and motivation to learn something new, but the extrinsic one is usually the school that put us in a path and put a bit of pressure on us to get some knowledge. And the learner's personality is important because we come together for such an international conferences. We can see the differences in our mentality, but we should also focus what's uniting us. And the cultural differences have to be taken in consideration because we have to understand the learner's drivers, what the culture is like, what different students, how they can be motivated, what reward, what progress, what feedback mechanism going to work. For example, in Arabic student or European one. So it's really not the one-fit-for-all style. I wrote this presentation to be a more thought-provoking one because there's so many higher education professionals coming together. There are a bunch of studies on gamification, and that's also very interesting how much you can collect, but there's no golden standard, there's no one way to do it. But when I studied this topic, I just was amazed the amount of possibilities that higher education and new teaching methods combination can give you. I also want to keep it realistic, so making studying more fun, not going to give you golden rewards all of a sudden. There are some negative results because if the balance of reward or any kind of game implication into study situation could also lead to pressure. And students under pressure, I think any human beings under pressure are not going to get the best outcome of this learning experience. Also very important that you have to execute your gamification process in a nice and balanced way. It's like marketing. You can't sell a badly designed product. So for gamification, there are limits, but there's also a lot of possibilities. And when you think about research and how gamification can fit into higher education, I saw endless possibilities for this. And I collected some thoughts for you because this is so great to have an international community to also design these ABC studies, how effective a study process, how it changes the behavioral part of the scientific outcome, and not only focusing on the cognitive part. So with gamification, you can focus on the behavior or cognitive effects. You can focus on the different groups of learners, whether a game type elements works better on girls or boys, or different cultures. You can also focus the game itself features, whether you create a leaderboard, how you create friendly competition, what kind of task you make your teaching process more game-like, more fun. But you also can focus on the measure itself. What kind of outcomes are you going to measure? So in future perspective, we can develop systematically designed studies that can test this approach, confirming the educational benefits of gamification. And here in this room, there's a possibility to do comparative studies between European and Arabic standards. So I really just want to encourage you, if you go home and you have a department with educational studies, to really start thinking about, to bring higher quality standards, what kind of new improvement can you also involve in combining our two words. If you think a bit further, our life is pretty much gamified. As a concept, you can find it in your own life. You can collect points, you can go to different banking systems, we talk about ranking with universities. It's also a kind of game, it's kind of competition between universities to reach a higher goal. Also, when you're traveling and just pinpoint on the map, where have you been? It's a kind of game. So let's enhance, let's embrace it, let's be human about games. There's also an interesting twist about the psychology of games. That was a study by Liberals in 2015, and only implementing, that was 2 groups of students. They got this exact same task, but one group was said, it's a game, and the other group just got it as a task, like a homework. And students who get the same task labeled as games, at the end of this experiment, the questionnaire showed that they were actually received the study outcome was better. They were more motivated. They enjoyed the task more because it was labeled as game. So I don't want to make seem gamification would be just a psychological trick, but just think about it. It's a new concept. It's something that you can take home and incorporate in your university life. I don't want to go too much details in it, but I came to Germany and not really speaking the language, so I tried to pick up as much as possible. And for that, I am using a gamified learning program to improve my language skills. And you can see it's an easy phone application. I do it every day, and maybe one day ich spreche sehr gut Deutsch, but that day is waiting a bit longer. So the impact of gamification, to summarize these thoughts, are to engage the students and encourage the creativity and complex thinking. And you can also teach so many soft skills with this. So I really would encourage you to play with the idea, because playing and gamification, it goes well together. So it should provide a safe place for the learners when they can learn and practice and be better without judgment or punishment. And it really should focus on the reward and not the classical high educational, that if you don't do good, you're gonna fail your course. The soft skills that can be improved by the use of this teaching method are showing improvement in time management, creative thinking, networking. Basically, what we are doing here can be also implemented in our university style. And thank you for your attention, and I hope this light topic was enjoyable.